Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, and it's great to have you here. I'm going to give it a little bit of time as some people join. It's kind of the afternoon, coming back from lunch maybe. My name is Daniel. I'm with Workstream, and it's my pleasure to be here today and help host the webinar. As a reminder, we're going to talk all about the potential risks that are kind of lurking in your operations. So whether it's taxes, payroll, onboarding, the list kind of goes on and on. We've invited four experts to share their knowledge and help you avoid some major headaches, especially, we're now end of October, so looking to the new year, and that also, sometimes presents new challenges and also opportunities. So hopefully we can over-index on the opportunities and decrease the challenges and the risks. Seeing a couple more people join. I think, yeah, let's get started. We can start to do some introductions. Abigail, would you give us a brief intro, please?
I'm Abigail Church. I work for Growth Lab Finance as a Service, or Growth Lab Financial Services. I am the HR business partner both for Growth Lab, the company, but also for several of our customers who need HR and payroll compliance assistance.
Awesome, awesome. Over to Jim.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Jim Cole. I'm the head of service delivery at Check Technologies. Check is an embedded payroll platform. I've been with Check for 5 years, in the payroll industry for 20. As you can imagine, I've seen a significant amount of payroll issues in that time, and looking forward to discussing some of those problems today.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. Stacy.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name's Stacy Littoral. I'm a partner at BPM. BPM is a top 35 CPA public accounting firm. We also do audit and advisory services. So I oversee our HR consulting team, particularly the team that supports our clients with system and payroll compliance and transitions and optimizations and all the things system and payroll related. I've also been in HR my entire career, focusing in the payroll and the HR tech space, particularly in the last 5 years since joining BPM. Great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Kevin.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. So I'm the Director of Accounting and Delivery for Ceteris. We're an automated bookkeeping platform specializing in delivering financials and bookkeeping to franchisees.
Perfect. All right. Well, like I said, we really rolled out all the stops to have an awesome panel here today. Just so much knowledge and experience. And the whole goal is to bring some of that to you and help you with your business and your operations. So as questions come to mind, feel free to share those out. And we've saved a little bit of time at the end for your questions. Let's get started though with kind of the topic at hand, which is it's all about risks and it's all about those things that are kind of lurking and maybe people don't even understand that they are a risk. And I've kind of bucketed the conversation into different categories or different buckets. The first one is all around onboarding. So with onboarding, that kind of marks the beginning of your relationship with a new hire. And so obviously it's really important to start things off on the right foot. That goes doubly with anything related to pay, right? So, Abigail, I'd like to ask you, can you share, from your experience, what are some of the biggest risks that are kind of lurking in that payroll process or the onboarding process, rather?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest one I tend to see is misclassification of employees, especially if you're accustomed to working with freelancers, contractors, people who like to be paid and do work on a contractual basis. Um, a lot of people don't understand or don't know, or they misinterpret that really there's this whole list that is out there that you have to go through and review and check. Does the person meet all of these descriptions or requirements? If they do, then they can be classified as an exempt employee or even as a contractor. depending on the scenario. And then in other situations, if they don't meet all of those requirements, they really need to be a non-exempt employee, which can either be hourly, a straight hourly employee, or they can be salary, but non-exempt. So you would record their pay for anything they do over 40 hours or whatever their home jurisdiction would require. There's also, when you're first getting their onboarding paperwork done, especially if it's being handwritten, there's a lot of room for error there. We might think a 4 is a 6 is a 4. So we see a lot of just data entry errors.
Yeah, those both of those issues probably sound pretty familiar. I'd imagine I've heard a lot about both of those things. Stacy, I'd love to ask you about recommendations you have around kind of creating a good new hire onboarding process that can preemptively kind of hopefully minimize the risk of some of these mistakes.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. And Abigail, thank you for the great segue. The manual errors and the handwritten, I think that would be our top recommendation, right? Is to automate what you can. So as much of the workflow that can be automated as possible, we strongly recommend doing that. Work with your, excuse me, work with your tech partner to make sure that everything is automated. Everything that can be automated is. There are definitely some processes that require human intervention, like some I-9 verification, that sort of thing. But the vast majority of the onboarding process can be automated. And another part of that is really important is to allow the employee to enter the information. There is not that data transfer then that happens where there could be human error involved. So allow the employee to send them a link to onboard and then have them enter the information themselves. And we'd also recommend consistency, right? So across your locations, across your departments, across your employee types, try to have as much consistency as possible in the information that you're gathering during onboarding. And then the last is checks and balances. So make sure there's somebody kind of reviewing everything before the employee is formally hired. There are processes like direct deposit pre-notes that systems can do to make sure that the account number that you have in their direct deposit is good before you send money to the wrong account or to an account that doesn't exist and it's going to get kicked back. Same thing with end of year, not related to onboarding, but end of year, have employees check their addresses before you send their W-2 to the wrong location. So just have those human checks and balances as a part of the process. That will definitely help avoid mistakes.
Yeah, a lot of great, like applicable suggestions there. I really like those. Okay, so that's kind of one bucket, which is onboarding. The next bucket is tax filing. So, we're already in Q4, which means we're, looking down the barrel at 2025. Kevin, I wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see business owners make in related to tax filing? And what could they do right now, end of October, to kind of get ready and hopefully avoid making some of those mistakes when they're filing?
Absolutely. I think the most common mistake we see is an owner that is taxed as a partnership or a sole proprietor, but has thought they should be on payroll and has been getting a W-2 or a paycheck every week. The IRS has indicated that these individuals do not qualify as employees. So we just need to be clear that these owners are talking with their payroll company and their advisors and make sure they understand whether they should be on payroll or not.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And maybe it goes without saying, but in a lot of those scenarios, what should that look like rather than them being on payroll?
Yeah, so it's going to vary, right? So it all depends on how the entity is taxed and organized. But you need to have that conversation with your payroll service provider, and you need to say, hey, I'm an LLC, but I pay taxes as an S corp. Sometimes we forget that how we're filing part. And an S corp, they need to be on payroll. An LLC by default with multi-members is going to be a partnership, and they should not. So it's just a conversation that an owner needs to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, from your perspective, what recommendations do you have to make filing day a little bit less stressful, hopefully.
Yeah, I think most important is just data hygiene, right? You really, really want to have a good data hygiene regimen, especially as you lead up towards the end of the year. I think Abigail and Stacy called out really well. It does start with onboarding. But if those things aren't caught at that time, you still want to catch them before the end of the year, and you still want to catch them before filing. So a few of the things that you definitely want to double check are those employee social security numbers. I think Stacy made a great point that bring the employee into it, have them check their own data, have them double check the address they have on file. Because if their W-2 gets mailed out and it goes to an ex's house, you don't want to be a part of that. Nobody wants to be a part of those tiers. So it's good for employees to be double checking their own information, knowing that it's going to appear on the W-2, legal name as well, right? I mean, these systems, sometimes kids, they sign up with their nicknames. You have to use your legal name, make sure you're putting the right information there. Same thing for any contractors, right? Making sure that they're giving you updated, relevant information, making sure that's correct. And then I also think with 2 months left, there's still plenty of time, but there's also limited amount of time, right? A company maybe has what? Between 4 and 8 payrolls left before the end of the year. If you are going to be adding any sort of imputed income, or you are going to be running bonuses, or as Kevin brought up, owners who should be paid, I do want to be clear, owners who should be paid may have a major bonus they need to put in, or they may need to max out certain things, right? So it's best to include that on a payroll that's run this year versus halfway through January and they're like, oh, you know what I meant to do was run this massive payroll for the owner of the company. So really plotting out the next few weeks and saying like, when am I going to address these things so that I could get them in before the end of the year so I can ensure that that first filing is perfect.
Yeah, some great recommendations there. Um, Moving on to the kind of the third bucket of risks or mistakes. Um, it's all has to do with growing. And obviously, as you grow as a business, that's a great thing. I know for, I think a lot of those watching, maybe that means opening up new restaurants or other new locations across different counties or even maybe in different states. And that can kind of present some unique challenges that need to be thought through. Abigail, what should business owners kind of think about as they're opening new locations? And then what are kind of some of the common risks that might be associated when if you have a business that's spanning, 2 different states, let's say?
Yeah. So first of all, opening a new location or hiring somebody to work from a different jurisdiction, that's really exciting for a business. That said, we need to understand, know, and look into what are the requirements in those jurisdictions. And it's not just state level; it could be locality expectations or guidelines or requirements. I'm sure everybody has had the Department of Labor's recent overtime ruling up in front of themselves toward the end of this year. The first change in salary at the federal level took place July 1st, the second one coming January 1st. And it's great to be aware that at the federal level it looks like this, but at the state level it could look very different. At the local level it could look very different. Even how they calculate overtime could look different. I know in Colorado, in some spaces, it's how many hours you work per day, but in Ohio, it's the total you work in a defined week. So being aware that it's not the same across the board, that you really do have to do your due diligence to understand what's required and expected in that employee-employer relationship, that they're classified correctly per that state and local jurisdictions classifications. And then also just being sure you know exactly what payroll tax accounts you need to open in each state. Some require state income tax withholdings, some don't. Some have a very different system of unemployment. Some require PFML, some do not. It's it's quite fun to dig in and see the differences between the different places that you'll find yourselves working in.
Yeah, there's a lot to keep in mind, and definitely one of those areas where ignorance is never an excuse, right?
Yep.
Jim, I wanted to kick it back to you, specifically when it comes to having a good payroll partner, that, and you're kind of in this growth phase of your business. Beyond some of the challenges that Abigail touched on, why is it important to have a payroll partner that can kind of maybe anticipate or assist with this growth phase?
Yeah, I think obviously I agree with everything Abigail said. I think that those are all super valid points. When you are thinking about a payroll provider, they have to enable your growth, or you have to be aware of when they won't enable your growth. And I think these are things that a company has to be aware of, and they are things that they should feel comfortable asking your payroll provider. In fact, I would say it's a red flag if you don't feel comfortable asking your payroll provider how they would support you with your growth. The way I think about it, though, it really is, it comes down to a proactive approach and a reactive approach with companies and with growth. So proactively, Abigail touched on some of this, but how is my payroll provider going to help me with new state registrations or new compliance laws that I need to be aware of? Um, what if I am hiring remotely? What are the rules for that? What does that look like for me? Or if you are growing so much that now all of a sudden you have two different pay schedules, right? You're opening up another franchise, all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Let's have all of our managers paid semi-monthly and let's have all of our employees paid weekly. Does your payroll provider support that? You need to know that. And then on the reactive side, right, as a company's going to grow, I think it's natural that they're going to run into some issues or they're going to make some mistakes. Whatever it is, you need to know that you have a payroll provider that's going to be able to help you solve those mistakes, and you need to know how to solve them, right? I think in the payroll world, it's probably not a surprise that when things do happen or when things do go wrong, you want them fixed very quickly, right? I think the best way to describe it is thinking about Men in Black, right? Where if something goes crazy, you want that little blinking light and you want people to forget what happened. When payroll errors happen, and they do, you want to solve it quick, and you want a team that's going to be there to support you and help you solve it quick.
Yeah, great advice, and love bringing in Men in Black too. That's awesome. Um, Moving on to the next bucket of potential mistakes, it's all related to compliance. Now, I think a lot of people that are joining us here, they probably work at businesses that employ a lot of hourly workers, and that can bring some unique challenges. Kevin, I wanted to ask you to weigh in. What sort of problems might a company that employs a lot of hourly workers run into, related to compliance? And then if you have any, examples or stories to share around some of the potential repercussions if you're not able to, uh, not able to align with doing things the right way in regards to hourly workers.
Yeah, I think the two biggest areas we see the most are going to be tipped wages or regular wages with QSR, and I think that's absolutely critical to walk your payroll provider, your HR benefits team through what's your business, what type of employees do you have, what it looks like in the future. That's one area of compliance that can go awry very quick with tipped wages. Second area of compliance is tracking hourly wages so we know how many hours we have across the board for census. And that really comes into play when we start looking at retirement plans that can potentially benefit the owners. Don't want to sound like Scrooge here, but ideally from a tax guy perspective, we want the plan and the benefits from the plan largely to go to the owners, the key employees, and that's determined by DOL rules. So we need to know the hours, we need to be able to run a census and see what the cost is going to be before we implement the plan.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Stacy, can you share maybe some examples of compliance risks within kind of with time tracking? Time tracking for hourly workers, that's a big part of their day, and it's something that you have to get right. How can a business kind of uh, practice effective risk management to avoid time tracking issues?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have quite a bit of experience with this with our clients more on the reactive side. And I like your quote earlier, Daniel, where you said ignorance is not an excuse. And when it comes to time tracking and wage and hour exposure, ignorance is unfortunately not an excuse. And I was looking up some data in from the wage and hour division from the DOL, and I read that in 2023, the DOL recovered $274 million in back wages and damages for 163,000 workers. Almost 30 million of that was food service workers, and another 8.3 million was retail workers. So it's definitely a very, of the top 6 categories, those were 2 of the highest. So it's a very high risk area. And those are just the ones that were reported and investigated. We're seeing a lot of audits come out now. We're helping clients respond to audit letters, navigate the audit process, because unfortunately it's very rabbit holey. Like we like to say, that you could find one thing and then that leads to another. And then if it's affected one employee, most likely it's affected multiple. And then you just get this downstream effect that gets to be really, really costly. So minimum wage, meal breaks, overtime, rest breaks, regular rate of pay calculations, like to Kevin's point on the tip calculations and that side of things. So when people have overtime or use PTO or sick or vacation leave, the calculations should look a little bit different. So having systems in place that record that and can calculate that on your behalf when you have many hourly employees, definitely want this process to be automated. And to Abigail's point, they vary by state, if not even by local jurisdiction, overtime rules and wage and hour and minimum wage. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we've had some San Francisco restaurant clients, and the rules for San Francisco restaurants, I just feel for all of those restaurant owners trying to navigate how complicated those tip rules are. So but not knowing them and not being able to take care of them is not an excuse. And so we unfortunately see these downstream effects of class action suits, where there are folks that get together and they say, hey, I read an article about, this meal break premium that I'm entitled to if I was, had to work through my meal break. And oh yeah, I didn't know about that. Tell me about that. And then just the conversations happen, and then a claim is filed, and it kind of goes down south from there. So really, like I said, unfortunately, we've seen this a lot on the reactive side. There's so much that you can do proactively. I would love and crave for the clients that are coming and saying, hey, I'm opening a business, help me get this right ahead of time. That's where really we would prefer to spend our time in helping them automate these processes as much as possible.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Moving over to maybe this is kind of a little more of a vague bucket, but I just kind of bucketed, the concept of process related mistakes. Like obviously that kind of feeds into a lot of what we're talking about. But business owners right now, always, but especially right now, are really trying to gain efficiencies wherever they can. And a lot of times that it takes the form of, all right, well, how can we improve our process and make that more efficient? But that can also be easier said than done. Stacy, I wanted to ask you, I think you have a great take on kind of combining processes with tools and having those together kind of play an important role together.
Yeah, we like to say over here with our team and our clients that process plus tool equals success. We a lot of times see clients that think that just because they've got, a smart technology that they're going to be covered. And then we've got clients that say, oh no, I've got staff that handle that. I don't need an upgrade in technology. I don't need to optimize my technology. We've got humans that manage that process. And the answer is neither are right. Really, what you need is a smart technology that is customized towards your business's needs, right? Like, where is your business at? What does your employee population look like? All the things that everyone here has talked about. And then you need the human checks and balances, the human processes that make sure that those workflows and the audits are happening. And I think it was Jim who said, like, just have some smart data, a data maintenance process where you're making sure that whenever whenever there's a significant change to your system or to your workforce, that you're just looking into that data and auditing it, involve the employees in that, have them audit the data, and have partners that, whether it's your payroll provider or your tech provider or a consultant that you work with, to just make sure that you do a regular compliance check. Those human processes they're not ever going to go away. Technology is great, and the technology is getting better and better every day, but you need the process, the human process, and the tool in order to be really successful.
Yeah, I love that concept of the balance between the two. It almost similar to I've heard from a lot of restaurant owners, even client facing, customer facing, right? Trying to do automation, but also having the human side. You got to have that balance. So I think that's such a smart way to look at it. Now, Kevin, I wanted to ask you, when you think about building an efficient process, a lot of times you're thinking in terms of something that spans a week, maybe a month, maybe a little more than that. But like it's also, there's a process that should be built when it comes to filing taxes that it's kind of something that can span an entire year or multiple years. How should business owners kind of think about building that process? And I think you're still on mute, Kevin.
Still on mute, the dreaded saying. Yeah, so you need to work with a trusted provider. So I think one of the most missed opportunities I see in the QSR restaurant industry is the work opportunity tax credit. But that's really critical for onboarding and getting the necessary information at that time. So 12 months later, you can actually get a credit. And, for some of these owners, especially multi-unit owners, this is a big credit when it comes down to it at year end, but you need to have all the documentation up front to make sure that employee qualifies.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. That's another area that, based on some conversations I've had, that automation can play a role, but you have to be smart about it to take the advantage of that. I wanted to open this up, and Kevin, you can speak to this, or anyone here. When it comes to thinking in terms of increasing efficiency, specifically with payroll, something that's kind of never shuts off. Anyone have any ideas of a quick win of a place that maybe a lot of business owners are overlooking, that they could pick up some saved time with not a lot of effort?
Yeah, I'm happy to hop in, and I'm sure there's some other great thoughts here. But number one, you'd be surprised at how many people don't actually know what their payroll process is. So I think the best way to find efficiency is to start with documenting what your process is, and going through that process alone will find any gaps or areas of improvement probably the quickest.
It's a great recommendation. Yeah, definitely. You can't fix what you don't know. Any other thoughts on the, payroll specifically?
Yeah, I think Stacy has touched on this too, but being able to either identify a payroll program that comes with time and attendance already as part of the process, or finding a time tracking system that integrates with your payroll is a great way, one, to bring in efficiency, but two, continue to help ensure accuracy and help mitigate risks associated with not getting that right.
Yeah, it's another great recommendation that slots in with a kind of a theme I feel like we've repeated a couple times today.
I
Um,
completely agree with that, Daniel. Sorry, I'll just jump in and add one more thing to what Abigail was saying, is that in that time tracking module, how people are clocking in, is it on their phones? Is it on a bio scanner? Just make sure that that is as efficient as process as possible, because a lot of times we hear from the management team that are required to approve payroll records before we can process, that is a big bottleneck. So making sure that whatever that time tracking is, it's fail safe, it's reliable, and it's something that works for whatever your population is. But also the functionality within your time module. So I touched on it a little bit earlier, but like things that automatically will track when a meal break should be, and like an attestation as to if somebody is waiving a meal break, even we've got clients that they have their people waive their meal break on a daily basis and answer the attestation every day. And just to kind of remove any of the questions as to what the risk could be there. And there's so many smart tools out there that can help automate those things. So I think it really is on the setup side of that, and just making sure that that's as clean as possible.
Yeah, great, great recommendations there. All right, I think we've kind of made our way through the different buckets of potential mistakes, risks. Um, as kind of a final question, hopefully some of those watching this webinar, they've heard something that's sparked a little bit of a thought of like, oh, maybe I can improve in this specific area. Maybe there's some room for growth, or for hopefully to maybe fix something that needs fixing. Abigail, for business owners who are looking to increase efficiency and decrease risk, those can maybe feel at odds a little bit. But specifically within payroll, what should they prioritize? Like, what will provide the greatest ROI for them?
I like to guide my clients toward systems that will automatically flag things that seem out of sorts. So you put somebody in as a salary exempt employee, it looks at their salary, it automatically flags. This isn't quite in alignment with what we expect to see on a federal or a state level, given what we see about their work address. Those systems that the second something's out of sorts with somebody's time tracking, it flags it so it can be rectified really in more real time instead of waiting till the end of a pay period to catch it and try to adjust it a week or two later. Anything that can proactively tell you this is new for you, here's what you should be looking at.
Yeah, definitely. That seems like such a great use of things like AI to, learn and identify those potential risks. That's a great recommendation. Jim, you spoke a little bit about kind of vetting payroll providers earlier. But I would just love for you to go into that a little bit more, specifically like how can you find the right provider that is ready to kind of be more of a partner versus just, another vendor?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, it's a great question. But you have to understand your needs first. It almost kind of goes back to really understanding your payroll process. What specific earning type might you need as a company, or types of reporting that you're reliant on in order to perform your process? What payment timelines might you want, or a specific tax you have to ensure is covered? I think it starts with understanding your specific business, and I do think that that's most important, right? So I would start there. Do you cover this? Do you remit Jeffersonville, Kentucky OLF tax? Oh, you don't? Maybe you're not for us, right? We have a lot of people in Jeffersonville, or whatever local might be relevant to you. So I think that that's probably number one. Number two, I think this is where you get to have kind of the bells and whistles, right? And I think the exciting things, Stacy, Abigail, we're talking about different flags in the system. I mean, it's almost 2025. Like, technology is really cool nowadays. There's a lot of cool things out there. So looking for the things that's going to excite you. I think employee portals is a great one. You want to get that information directly from the employee. You don't want it to be handwritten and then somebody else has to key it into 4 other systems. Like, that's outdated. Don't do that. Like, there are solutions today, like you can use those. And then whatever else, whatever other exciting tools a system has that works for you, I think that that's great. And then I did say it before, this is sort of like my third one. And, I think that this really is the safety net of any payroll provider, is how are you going to support me when things go wrong, right? You should know the answer to that. I forget who said it, but, payroll's a people business, right? people make mistakes. People don't get paid the right way. When they don't get paid the right way, they don't pay rent, or whatever other dire situation you can imagine with not being paid timely. When those things happen, you want to be able to talk to somebody who's going to give you a solution immediately. So if I had to go back and rank them, it's, what do you need to be successful to run your payroll? What other tools make it exciting for you to do it with that platform? And then what support is going to be there for you if any of those things fail you?
Fantastic advice. I love all of those. We did have a question that I wanted to just throw out to the panel. So if you want to answer, you can do a little, hand raise or thumbs up or whatever. But Christian asks, do I need to document gifts of free meals at my restaurant as income to my employees? I thought that was a good question. Anyone want to weigh in there? Obviously not legal advice, disclaimer, but
I'm going to give my very typical HR answer, which is it depends. It
perfect.
depends on the state and the locality, and the amount, like the value of the amount of the meal. Generally, again, not legal or tax advice. Generally, no, it should not be. But if you're also in, a really high-end steakhouse in San Francisco, maybe. So it depends. It depends is really the best answer, but generally, no, but it depends. Check with your tax advisor or your HR consultant.
I love it. Great
Good
answer.
answer.
Cool. Well, with that being said, I think we've talked about all that we plan to talk about. I wanted to give each of you the opportunity to leave maybe one final takeaway, kind of emphasize something maybe you talked about a few minutes ago. Kevin, why don't we start with you for one final takeaway?
I'm going to go with my answer that applies to most tax items, and it's good onboarding. I think you need to make sure that you're doing it right from the start, and that's ultimately going to save you in the end.
Love it. Stacy, let's go to you for final takeaway or thought.
I love that, Kevin. I'm going to piggyback on that and say, yeah, do it right from the beginning, and be willing to invest a little bit. It might feel like, oh, this is a lot of time, energy, money, resources going towards, the setup or having experts come in and help guide the compliance setup. But trust me, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what you would spend if you were caught in non-compliance. So yeah, definitely be willing to make the investment in the right technology, get it set up correctly, have your advisors in place. It will save you in the long run, I promise. I can connect you with some clients who would tell you the story of otherwise, and it's not fun. So
Yeah, I feel like that's a big theme today is proactivity and preemptively stopping things before they get much larger than we can handle. So I love that. Jim, let's get a final takeaway from you.
Yeah, I think one piece of advice I always like to put out there is when you get paid, I think most employees look at their bank account. Um, Tell your employees to look at their paycheck every once in a while. You can surface a lot of issues much quicker, and prevent them from being large problems. But in the spirit of year end upon us, I will say have them look at their W-2s when they receive them and not on April 15th. I've dealt with that situation too many times. My W-2's wrong. It's April 15th.
Yeah, that's a tricky one for sure. And Abigail, want to give you the chance. One final takeaway.
I've got to say how Kevin started off this final piece was perfect. But yeah, proactivity is really key. You want to get it right the first time. I think I would sum it up with, if you feel nervous about handling it yourself, you probably shouldn't.
Perfect. I want to put that on my wall. I feel that way about a lot of things. That's great. Well, thank you once again to each of you as panelists for contributing your knowledge and your wisdom with everyone here today. And thanks to everyone that joined us. We are going to be emailing out a link to the recording so you can watch your favorite part again or share it with a colleague. But with that being said, everyone have a great rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.